Welcome to our first podcast for Recovery Arkansas and beyond. Today you get to meet our host, Jay Cupit, and our producer, Steve Porche.
Well, hi, Jay.
Here we are.
How long you been waiting to do this?
Long time. Been wanting to do one of these for several years. So
this is going to be our first one.
So here we are.
Well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some questions of you,
okay,
and kind of let yourself get organized here, and then get to know you.
Sure.
So okay. First off, tell me who you are.
My name's Jay Cupit, and I live in Heber Springs. I've got a wife. I've got a daughter named Laramie, and been in and out of police work about all my life, and decided that it's time to retire.
We will say Valerie's name. She's not just your wife. See, I get in trouble with that with Lori. She gets on me because I just call her my wife or
right,
her, and
right,
I get in trouble for that.
Right.
So make sure you introduced your child, but you didn't introduce your wife.
It's just a matter of getting loosened up and ready to do this. And yeah, I have a beautiful wife named Valerie, and we've been married for 41 years this year, and just had our anniversary, and we've got a 34-year-old daughter. Make sure that's right, 34, yeah.
So with the last name Cupid, did you get married on Valentine's Day?
I tried. I did. We got married on February 11th, and I told her, I said, let's do this on Valentine's Day, and that way when the deal comes out in the paper, the announcement, it'll say Cupid gets married on Valentine's Day. But Valentine's Day that year was like a Tuesday, and she said, I'm not getting married on a Tuesday. I'm getting married on a Saturday. So that's what we did.
There you go. Okay. So you were in law enforcement.
I was.
And now you are in charge of the other side.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what the other side is and how it got started.
Well, that's a long thing, but we got time, so we get to talk about it. Over the years, I'd watch people go in and out of the Department of Correction. Mm-hmm. And they would come out with no plan, and they'd stick to it, and they would go right back. And I just knew there had to be a better way. And then in 2007, I had a music store, and I sold the store. And so I had a conversation with God one day, and I said, okay, what is it you want me to do? The store's out of the way. Because the store was a problem for me, and the fact that I loved it too much, and I'd put it in front of God, and I'd put it in front of my wife and my daughter. And so I'm sitting at the table, and I had a pen and a paper, pad in front of me, and I just started writing what was being put on my heart, and it was long-term drug and alcohol treatment program. And he laid it all out for me, and I said, so what are we going to call this thing? He said, The Other Side. Because people come out of this storm of addiction, and they come out on the other side with Jesus. That's where they're going to get their start. And so that's kind of where that came from. In 2014, we put a group of people together, a bunch of people I had known that had struggled with addiction in the past. One guy had actually taken to prison for it, and he and I, after he'd gotten his life together, we had run into each other, and I wasn't really a big fan of his, but he came over to me and he reintroduced himself and said, "Hey, I'm not the same guy I used to be." And so I watched him for that weekend because we were at a kind of a spiritual retreat, and I realized he was right. He was not the same guy he used to be, and he and I became friends. And so he was one of my first calls about coming in and doing a startup team with us. And there was a gentleman, we lost him a few years ago now, named George Rydam. He and I had talked about doing something for years, but we just never came to the plan never came through, and he was one of my first calls. George and Kevin, and then I called several other people that I knew had struggled with addiction, and we just got together and I said, what are we going to do about this? the government's not the answer. It's not going to do anything. But I told him, I said, in 2009, I'll back my story up a little bit. In 2009, I got a job at Searcy Police Department, and I was driving right up the highway here. And when I made this corner, I know people think I'm nuts, and I am. I'm a nut for Jesus. But it's like God tapped me on the shoulder and said, this is where I want you to do this. And I'm like, okay, well, I get it. I still don't know how to do this. And so anyway, in 2014, we put this group of people together, and we started talking about this. And I shared with them the first night what God had revealed to me, that he wanted us to buy this school and put in drug and alcohol treatment program.
Where's the school located at?
In Wilburn, Arkansas.
Wilburn, Arkansas.
It's about halfway between Heber Springs and Pangburn, if you're familiar with this area at all. But anyway, I told him that God had revealed this to me and where he wanted it done. And everybody was, yes, let's do this. So I called the superintendent's office of the school system that owned the school, which was Concord. And I asked him, I said, what do you guys owe on the Wilburn school right now? And they said $800,000. And I said, thank you very much, and hung up. It rocked on and went on that was in September of 2014. We're still trying, we decided we were going to try to put together a intervention group. And if you called me and said, hey, my son or my daughter's messed up, we were going to take some guys and some gals over who had been through that. Mm-hmm. And, hey, this is what it did. We lost our job, our wife, kid, whatever, went to prison, whatever. And try to talk them into going to a faith-based, Jesus-centered rehab. And so we're trying to put this thing together. And in June of 2015, a friend of ours named Quentin White came to one of the meetings. And George always said he's the one that invited Quentin. I said I was the one. We probably both invited him. But Quentin came to the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, he says, we need to buy that Wilburn school out there and put a drug and alcohol treatment program in. And we laughed at him because we knew what the school owed on this property out here. So anyway, the next morning I woke up and I realized God had probably put that in Quentin's head so that I would listen. And so I picked the phone up and I called the Concord School District and I said, look, what my plan was I was going to say, let us lease it for a couple of years. And if it works out like I think it will, then we'll try to buy it. So I get the superintendent on the phone and I said, I want to talk to you about the Wilburn School. And he said, yeah, we just put it up on the auction block. And I said, you're kidding. I said, how much do you owe on it now? He said, between $600,000 and $700,000. I said, is that going to be your opening bid? Do you have to retire your bond issue before you can sell it? And he goes, no, it goes to the highest bidder. Now I'm excited. So I said, what do I need to do to be able to bid on this? And he said, call this lady. And so I had to call the auction company. I talked to them, and she said, it's real easy. You just need $40,000 in cash to bid on this. Well, we didn't have $1, much less 40,000 of them, right? So I'm like, okay. So that night I got the startup team back together, and I said, look, the school's up for auction. And if we miss it, we'll never get this opportunity again. Right. So everybody was unanimous. Let's do this. So George Ryden was really good with paperwork and forms, and he was an old Navy submariner. And so he started working on all the stuff it was going to take. And we in 30 days we got incorporated. We set a board together. We passed our bylaws and began to work on our 501c3, which is our nonprofit status. And in the meantime, being from here and knowing several people, my job was to go out and raise earnest money. So I'm going out, and in about a week, I've got about $5,000 raised. And I'm pretty happy about that, but I'm a long ways from where I need to be. So I went over to some friends and spoke to them about this, and I said, look, this is what we want to do and where we want to do it. And about an hour into our conversation, they said, well, tell me what we can do to help you make this happen. And I said, well, I'm raising earnest money. And they said, how much? And I said, $40,000. And they went, just go bid on your school. We got that covered. And they gave us $40,000. And I was really excited then, because there are times where you wonder, is this me? Is this what I've got in my head, or is this what God's passing off to me to do? And when they agreed to give us $40,000, I knew right then, that was that first hit between my eyes. This is a God thing, because I'd been a cop all my life. I hadn't made $40,000 in a whole year, much less somebody sitting down and giving us $40,000 cash. So we got real excited, and we had raised about $50,000 before the auction. And so I get the startup team together again, and I said, look, the night before the auction, I said, I feel comfortable about to bid up to $100,000 on the school, because I think when people know it's ours and it's not just a pipe dream anymore, then they'll
people will get involved.
They'll get involved in it, and they'll support it. And so that morning, I go up there, and I'm very excited because I've got a little card with some numbers on it, and I get to bid. And they opened up the bid for $350,000.
Oh, ouch!
That's what I said. And nobody bid. And then they said, okay, how about $250,000? Nobody bid. How about $150,000? Nobody bid. And I had been out here so many times. I had my own set of keys to this property. They had told me, just hide the keys out there where we can find them if we send somebody out to look at the property. And I'd been out here a dozen times or more in that 30 days. And so the auctioneer points at me in the crowd, and he says, I know you want this property. Tell me what you'll give me for it. And I said, $10,000. And he said, I have a bid for $10,000. Do I hear 15? And the auction began to roll. And we ended up buying 53,000 square feet of buildings. We bought almost 14 acres of land for $60,000.
Wow.
And we had to pay the auction company $6,000. So
$66,000
was the total. And then by the time we closed on the property, it was paid for. That's God. That's you can't explain
the property here. The property here is free and clear.
The property here is free and clear.
You've got 14 acres,
right,
with everything.
And they had split it up into 3 different parcels.
Sure.
There's an agricultural building down here that was on one parcel. The campus was on a parcel, and then there was a ball field out here, and it was on another parcel. And at the time that we won the auction, the amount for the school, one of my friends came up to me and said, hey, bid on the whole thing. Bid on the whole thing. And I knew what they had bid and what they'd gotten the agri building for, and I knew what they'd gotten the ball field for. And I said, do you have any idea how much we could do with that much money to renovate the school? I really don't want to do that, and then I don't want to jeopardize losing it. So we ended up just sticking with what we had. The guy that bought the ball field ended up selling us the ball field for what he had in it. So, it all worked out really good. Now we don't own the agriculture building. That belongs to a guy that I know, and one day he may be willing to sell it, and maybe we'll be in a position to buy it. But right now, we've got exactly what God wanted us to have, and we're very, very tickled with it. So as we go along, Debbie Baldridge was on the startup team with me, and she worked for me at the county, and we would go up and get people out of jail every day, and we would take them out to work projects. And so she comes up to me one day, like a day or two after the auction. She goes, okay, Smarty Britches, we bought a school now. Where are we going to come up with what it's going to take to put beds and pillows and sheets and all this stuff? I said, I don't know.
Well, did you even know how many people you were going to bring in to start the program with?
I had no idea. And I told her, I said, I'm like the dog that caught the car. What do I do with this thing now? And 2 days after that conversation, a friend of mine named Jimmy Hudspeth called me. He was an architect here in town. And he said, hey, Bad Boy Mowers bought the Narrows Inn. It went into foreclosure. And so he said, how many beds do you need out there? And I said, well, I don't know. How many can you get me? He said, I think I can get you about 30. I said, that's perfect. So he and I went up to Bad Boy Mowers the next day and talked to the guy, the Bad Boy guy. And he said, you can have anything you want out of this motel, except the refrigerators, the heat and air units, and the microwaves. So the next day, a bunch of us showed up with 5 trailers. And the guy said, it's got to go out here or it goes in the dumpster. So we're all excited. Well, we're getting up there, and it's like a 25-mile trip or more from here to Greer's Ferry.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, man, we're not going to get this done in a timely manner for him, and he's going to start throwing stuff in the dumpster. So I looked next door to the motel up there, and there was an empty building, an empty store. And it had a for sale sign out front. So I went to the realtor, and I said, hey, do you think we could borrow this and just store some stuff in there for like 30 days, 5, 6 weeks, whatever? He goes, I don't know. Let me call the lady that owns it. So he did. He called her, and she said, yeah, that would be fine. She said, I won't charge him anything, but she said, just tell him to pray for that because that building really needs to sell. I said, we'll pray for it going in. We'll pray for it going out.
Pray for it all the time. Yeah, exactly.
Not a problem.
Exactly.
And, so what we would do is we would load those trailers up. We would run across the street, unload it, back them back down. And we took everything out of the motel in 2 days. We stripped it. We got 41 beds, pillowcases, sheets, comforters.
That was my next question. So you got all the bedding
chairs,
along with
tables.
it.
We got everything. And then
Wow.
the next day, the second day we went up there, they used to have a restaurant in there. And so we opened this one room, and there's all their restaurant equipment. There's mixing bowls and plates, saucers, forks, knives, spoons, you name it. Anything that you need to open a restaurant, they had it in there. We could have went in business the next day, and we hadn't even closed on the school yet. It was amazing.
Well, that's you know what? See, that's God sent. That's exactly what
it is. God sent. And there was another thing that happened right after we bought it. You know, this school had sat abandoned for several years, and vandals had come through and stripped all the wires, or not all of them, but a lot of the wires out of the gymnasium. And so I got to thinking about that the night after the auction, after it was over. That night I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking, man, those guys might come in there and strip the rest of those wires out, knowing that we're fixing to take possession of it. Mm-hmm. So I called the superintendent the next day and I said, hey, would there be any way we could put a guy out there on the parking lot in a travel trailer just to kind of be the night watchman out there till we close on this thing? He goes, no, it's a great idea. We didn't have a travel trailer. So I started calling people around. I said, look, I got this lady on the phone, and I love this woman. She's awesome. I said, hey, do you know where I could rent a travel trailer for 4, 5, 6 weeks? She goes, no, I don't. She said, but me and my husband have got 2 trailers, and we've been trying to figure out where we're going to donate one. So I just figured it out. She said, we're donating it to you. And so they gave us a really nice fifth-wheel travel trailer, and we put a guy in the parking lot until we closed, and everything worked out really nice. But time after time after time again, there's always, every time we've had a need, God showed up and put us in the right direction to go and find where to get that need fulfilled.
You told an interesting story. You told it again today to my wife that the lottery was at $500,000.
No, it's $500 million.
$500 million.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
$500 million, and
Yes.
you prayed to God that, hey, we need to win this so that we can do everything that we need to do. And what did God tell you? I
told him, I said, my kids could run this thing on that much money. And God speaks to my heart and says, how can I prove to you that I'm going to provide everything you need if you have that much money?
Well, and look, and everything you just got through talking about, from the beginning to the the inception of this place.
Right.
Every step that you're probably like me. If I pray about something, I know God's going to take care of it, so I don't even worry about it anymore.
Right.
But our nature is to what? The flesh is still going to worry about it. Right. But the Spirit says, you don't need to worry about it.
I've had bouts with anxiety over my life and, for different things. But the night of the auction, I slept like a baby because I knew that
take care of it.
This is going to be taken care of, and he was going to provide. And it's been awesome. This is probably the least like work of anything I've ever done. It gives you indigestion about a lot of things that happen around here. But as far as it feeling like work, it doesn't. There were a couple other things that happened too. When we were remodeling the what I call the old elementary building, there's 4 big rooms in there and then 2 offices, and we were going to make that our dorm. So it used to be the elementary school, so there was bathrooms right down the center between the 2 sets of rooms. and one for boys and one for girls, and you could access those on either side. So there was a sewer line running through there, and I looked at it, and we actually decided that that's where we would put the bathrooms for the guys. So each room would have its own individual bathroom. And so I told the plumber, I said, look, why don't we just take this floor out and just put a brand new sewer line through here? I said, because this sewer line that's in here is as old as I am, and we'll have trouble with it. And he told me, he said, that's the best idea the best idea you've had yet. So Jason Sprouse was working for us at the time, and he and I were talking about it, and we went down there and looked at the room and kind of figuring out what was going to happen. And I told him, I said, what do we need to do to get this done? He said, well, I need a walk-behind saw or some kind of concrete saw. And I said, well, can we rent one over at Cersei? And he said, yeah, I think so. So I said, well, you go over there and get that done, and y'all can get started busting this floor out. And as we're walking out talking about this, and we go down the sidewalk, there's a guy who walks up to us, and he goes, hey, I need to do some community service work out here. I said, really, what do you do? He said, concrete work. I said, wow, that's pretty cool. I said, well, stick around. Jason's going to go rent a saw, and we're going to bust this floor out. And he goes, well, don't do that. He said, my dad's got one at the house. So they went down to his dad's house. His dad loaned us the saw for a week or whatever it took for us to get all that done. It cost us 3 saw blades. That's a God thing. Yeah. As we're getting close to finishing and getting ready for people to come in, Steve Crablin was working for us, and he came in and he said, hey, I need to build get some cabinets built. And I'm like, okay, well, we don't have any money. I mean, we've about spent everything we've had. And I said, I thought we were just going to bolt sinks on the wall and make this a handicap accessible area anyway. He goes, well, we are. But he said, you need somewhere to put your toothbrush down. And I'm like, well, you're right. I see what you're saying. I said, I tell you what, go down and get me a material list and bring it to me, and I'll make some calls around, and I'll see if we can get someone to help us with this. And so we're walking out of the office talking about this, and there's an older gentleman standing on the sidewalk. And he says, hey, I need to do some community service work out here. I said, really? What do you do?
Tell me. A cabinet maker.
He said, cabinets? I'm like, there's no way in the world you do cabinets. He goes, yes, sir, that's what I do. And I kept waiting on Ashton Kutcher to come out, and you just got punked. But it wasn't. It was God. He showed up, and I said, okay, look, go down with Steve, get me a material list together. Let's see what we can do, and I'll try to get somebody to help us. He had enough stuff in his cabinet shop that he went down there and he built 3 cabinets for us and didn't charge us a dime. Coincidence? I don't think so.
We're back to the $500 million again.
We're back to the $500 million again. I'll show you. I'll provide everything you need if you'll just trust me. And that's what we have to do. We have to trust him every day. Every day.
That's, so you brought something up earlier, and I'm going to bring it up now. Donations is how you keep this place going.
Yes.
But I also know that people can basically, this is the wrong word to use, can rent your students or your.
We do work projects out in the community, mm-hmm. and look, we don't ask for a dime. We don't. A lot of the people that we go out and help, they want to help us back, mm-hmm. and they'll ask us. They'll say, "Well, what is this going to cost us?" And I'm like,
they've done work. They've come to my house.
Yeah.
I've had them come to my house. Yeah. I had to rework my deck.
Right.
And we brought 3 guys over, and they got a job done. And I donated $400 for that.
Right.
And you guys looked at me like you didn't need to do that. Well, yeah, because it was well worth $400 to me.
Right.
And I've got other projects that I'm going to do the same thing. So that's why I bring this up. Because there are opportunities for people that if they need yard work, if they need things done, that they can basically just ask you,
right.
and the guys will come out and do the work, and then it's a donation. That's all it is. And it's exactly a donation to a 501c3 also.
Yes. Now, you can't double dip on that thing. You can't get something done like your leaves raked and mm-hmm. then file that as a donation. Mm-hmm. It's the IRS gets really terrible about that.
Hinky
kind of
about
stuff.
it.
Hinky. So I was looking for the right word to kind of make sure that we kept this clean. But They get kind of hinky about it, and but it's just like today. I went to Walmart this morning and had to get something, and ran into the lady I know, and she's just kind of struggling right now, and she's got some plumbing issues, and she's got some electrical issues, and we're not plumbers and we're not electrical guys, but we're going to go over and see if we can help her figure out what the problem is, and try to get her some help so that she can go through her life. She's got a couple grandkids living with her, and man, that's what we're here for. That trips my trigger when we have an opportunity to go out and help somebody like that who's really struggling, who just doesn't have the means to get that done. We've got some guys that we can go out there, and it may be as simple as there's a water line broken or something that we could help troubleshoot that and get it fixed.
Well, again, like I said, I've had guys come over, and you had a gentleman here named Kyle.
Yeah.
And Kyle was a tradesman, electrician.
Yes.
And he came to the house. Now, we were rebuilding. We're in addition to our bedroom and our bathroom.
Right.
And my wife's closet. We'll just leave it at that.
Right.
And so it all had to be wired. It all had to be everything, and the run to the box, and the whole 9 yards.
Yes.
And so I thought it was going to take a couple of days.
Right.
3 hours later, he comes to me and he says, "Okay, I'm done. What else do you want me to do?"
Right.
And I looked at him. I said, "Kyle, what do you mean you're done?"
Right.
And he had done everything. He says, "Oh, by the way, your box downstairs, it was kind of a little funky."
Right.
He goes, "So I straightened it out too.
Right.
I got all the wiring in there correctly and got to the right stuff." And I was going,
Right.
"Are you serious?"
Right.
And I went upstairs and started flipping switches and checking receptacle. Everything worked.
Right.
I had a situation with a ceiling fan.
Right.
That was not wired correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And he got up there and fixed it, and I'm thinking, what do I owe you?
Right.
And he says, "You don't owe me anything." He
Right.
says, "You know what?" He says, this is a process that
Yes.
going through the other side.
Yes.
And he goes, "I feel honored to be able to do this."
Right.
And
Right.
he was just one of the nicest guys.
Yep. He's good.
And he's and he's graduated the program.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's back to being an electrician.
Right.
The one thing he did tell me that he knew, he says, "I can't go back around the people that I was around before."
He's right.
Because if I do that,
Yep.
I'm going to go back and I'm going to fall backwards, and
Right.
that's not what I want. So I have to start over. And I told him, I said, "If there's anything you need," and I got his telephone number in my billfold right now.
Right.
And so if I need anything, Kyle will be the one that I'll go to. But that's the type of people. People have the impression that the students that you have here, whatever, what do you call them?
We call them residents. We call
Okay.
them, I call them the guys most of the time.
Okay, so the guys that are here, people don't understand. They think that, well, they're just a bunch of druggies, or they're,
Right.
Straight out of prison or
Right.
whatever. They don't understand. These are people that were out in the community
Yes.
that had problems, that got addicted to drugs, got addicted to alcohol.
Right.
And that happens to everybody. There is not a walk of life out there that doesn't get affected by that.
That's right. That's right.
And-
Whether it's directly or indirectly, whether it's a cousin or a aunt or an uncle, or
And sometimes they just have to, they need to get away from it,
yes.
okay, and get God back in the center of their life.
Yes. Yes.
And-
And when they go back home, we call that going back to Egypt.
Yeah.
Because the Israelites were doing that about 3 weeks after they crossed the Red Sea. They were telling Moses, at least our meat pots were full over there. They only beat us like 5 days a week or whatever. And, we call that going back to Egypt, So,
Well, and so that's that's what I like when I see the program.
yes.
I know you guys, we're at the Cowboy Church.
Right.
And you guys show up there, every 3 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, we go there probably about every quarter or so.
Yeah. And it's fun to see them, because when they all show up, I mean, they're a bunch. They've got Jesus on their mind.
They do.
And
Cowboy Church is my home church. I was raised up in what's Renew Church now
Mm-hmm.
up here, and And we went up there for a long time, and we got sidetracked and ended up out the Cowboy Church. And, our friend Brad was the music director out there. We wanted to go hear him play, and we went out there and just, fell in love with that place. So.
I'll tell you what, when I first went there, because I lived up in Jonesboro, and so Lori took me over there, and as soon as I walked in there, I said, "This is home."
Yeah, it's very welcoming.
And the people there are phenomenal.
Yes.
And very, some churches you go to, and I hate to say this, they're kind of judgmental.
Right.
This group here, it's Cowboy Church. They show up with cowboy hats. They show up in jeans. They show up. But you know what? There's nothing in the Bible that says you have to be all dressed up when you come to see Jesus. No.
And when that started, there was a lot of people here in town that I've known for years that probably would not have stuck their head inside of the church for anything. Mm-hmm. And when they started having that church service in the sale barn, mm-hmm. that was a place a lot of those guys were so comfortable being that it took away the stigma of, well, I'm going to go up here and, these people are going to be wearing suits. And it took that away, and those guys found a place that they could go and find Christ and enjoy going and seeing the people that they had been around and grew up with or whatever. It was an awesome place. It was an awesome concept to reach out to people who normally people didn't feel like they were being reached out to. Mm-hmm. And I'm not knocking any churches, man. Look, don't misunderstand that. But there's a lot of people, and we all know there's a lot of people been hurt in church, by church people, and it gives that stigma, and they'll throw their hands up. But the thing about it is, if they would just come in there and go to that church, wherever they got hurt, I'd almost bet you that they would find people who would welcome them in and love on them just like they did at Cowboy Church. But it was the right thing at the right time, and God does that to us. He uses the right thing at the right time.
I'm amazed. There'll be anywhere from 300 to 700 people in that church every single week.
Every week, and
the music ministry is fantastic. And then when you just never know. Jimmy has preached there.
Right.
Benny has preached there.
Right.
But we got a pretty good preacher now.
And
he's going through some stuff. Satan's working on him.
Yeah,
he's got some physical issues and stuff. And I hope that we get Mr. Shelton on the show.
Yeah.
Because he's got his testimony is.
He's got a great testimony.
Phenomenal.
I call Brother Bob. I always tell people he's salty.
Oh yeah, he is. He really is.
Yeah,
he'll do little Facebook things every now and then, and when he's in his cowboy hat and everything, and and his wife, bless her.
She gets a lot of prayer, I'm sure.
Oh well, yeah, and because she's up there, he'll be talking. Yeah. And he'll bring something up. The other day he was talking about making brownies and how hard the brownies were, And she just kind of looked at and you look over at her because she's always in the front row right there. Yeah. And she'll just have her head down. She'll just be shaking her head like this. But
they're a great couple. They really are.
Yeah. And that's what the Cowboy Church is also evolved with the other side.
Yes.
And that's
the Cowboy Church deems us as their mission. We're one of their missions that that they support us and they help us, and Jimmy Thomas is out here as a missionary from the church, and so it's man, they're good. There's several. I don't want to start naming churches that support us because I'll miss somebody, but y'all know who you are, right? You know who you are, and look, man, we couldn't do this without them. We could not do this without him. And what I love about this more than anything is when we first started, I won't say who it was, but he came up to me and he said, you'll be lucky if there's 3 churches that will support you. And I think we've got over 20 right now that send us something every month. And that's nice.
Why wouldn't they be involved? Well, that's the thing. Like you said, it's all the brotherhood. Right. And we're all brothers in Christ.
It gives the churches a really great place to minister to broken people, because this whole thing, I've always said, the other side is nothing more than a love story that God wrote to people who are broken, because that's who we have out here. There's not one guy, if you got him in here and just started asking him questions, he would tell you, I'm broke. I am broken as I can be, and I'm finding my way through Christ. And they can come in here and they're ready to die. And within 3 or 4 days after they've gotten in God's Word, they got a prayer life started, and they're around a bunch of guys. Let me tell you, these guys out here, if you saw them on the street back a year ago, most of them are, I'm going to try to clean this up, they're bad dudes. They're bad dudes. Most of these guys are bad dudes, or they have been known to be bad dudes on the street. And within 3 to 5 days, they're over here hugging each other, telling each other they love each other. And it's not because of anything that we've done. It's the fact that Christ has gotten on their heart and moved them to a place where they found out, hey, there are people out here that love me, and I don't have to do anything for them. Nothing. All I have to do is be here, and they're going to love me. And it's amazing to watch that transformation. And the next thing you know, you look over there and they're smiling. And that's what gets me excited every day, is when I see those guys who are so broken, who began to find their way through Christ. And that's
one of the things that I have noticed. Look at their eyes when they come in.
Yes.
And then look at the joy in their eyes.
Yes.
After God has gotten into their life and Jesus has talked to them.
That's right.
And you see that darkness that was in their eyes go away.
Right.
And people can smile. We see it all the time. You can smile, but if their eyes aren't smiling, then they're just faking it.
They've got their mask on.
That's it.
That's right.
But when they, like you said, when they see the love, when they feel the love, and a lot of the times those guys were missing love.
Right.
And when they find here that someone loves them, there's no ulterior motive.
That's right.
There's no ulterior motive. It's, hey, you know what? You come in here, let's give it a shot.
Right.
See what happens. See what you think. And understand that when you get here, it's going to be hard on you.
Yes.
The first 30 days, it's going to be tough.
It's tough in the 5th month. I mean, we have guys and they struggle with it every day, even though what keeps them here is they know that they've got to get it right. And we had a guy that came through here, and man, he struggled. And 5.5 months he's in here, and he hadn't got it yet. And boy, one day, light turned on, and he got it. And never have I been so proud of somebody, because there was no reason for him to stay. He'd given up. He was done. And then he had that encounter with Christ and changed everything.
And that's what makes it. That's what this is all about.
That's what this is all about. What we do out here, we create a bubble for these guys to come into, leave the world as much as they possibly can. We don't let them watch TV out here. There's a TV and they'll watch YouTube stuff, but it's usually like Louis Giglio or somebody, or David Jeremiah or somebody like that they'll watch that some, but it's not even. I mean, there's a designated night to watch that kind of thing, and if it's a Christ-centered movie, then we'll let them watch that on Saturday night. But as far as, we just kind of put them in that bubble, and look, if I could do it for them, I'd do it, but I can't. It's something that they have to get on their own.
Well, it's back to those 2 words we talked about. It's called want to. You have to want to change.
You got to want to change.
And if they want to change, you can't change for your wife. You can't change for your parents. You can't change for your siblings. You can't change for your friends. You have to change for yourself.
That's right. And if you'll get this right, then all this gets right. And we've watched time and time again. I'll just give you an example. One of the guys that works for me came up here from Texas. And when he came up here, his family wasn't speaking to him. But he came in, he dug in, he got all these things that he needed to get. And when he graduated, there were 3 rows of people that drove up here from Texas to come to his graduation. And that's that's what I love to see, because you start seeing these families start getting put back together. And a lot of times they're not even speaking when they come out here. And we had one guy not too long ago. I don't think he ever had a visitor from his family here, and still to this day doesn't. But he hasn't quit. He did not quit. He did not give up. He plugged right through it, and he's in phase 2 now. And look, I'm proud of him, because he wasn't doing it for them. It's obvious they never showed up. He did it for himself, and he'll get it figured out, and he'll have that relationship with Christ that'll get him through those hard times. Because, there's a difference between happiness and joy. And I've always said this, I could go to Little Rock and I could buy a brand new car that's way over my head. I could probably work the numbers out, and I've got the credit score. I could do that. And I promise you, if I got like a really nice Jag or something like that, I'd be up here, be giving everybody a ride, right? I would be absolutely proud of that. But the thing about it is, in about 90 days, that thing that brought me so much happiness is fixing to be on the back of a rollback headed back to Little Rock, because I can't pay for it. That's happiness. The joy that Christ puts in us is, even if that were to happen, I'll find the joy as I watch it roll away. It's a difference between happiness and joy. Joy doesn't go away. Joy will help you get through those hard times, even though it doesn't get you out of those hard times, but it's there, and you know that Christ said, or God said in Psalms 23, said, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me."
That's right.
And so he's going to walk with us through all this mess, and he'll be there for us. And I've seen more answered prayer out here since we started this thing than I've seen in all of my life put together. It's just like one after another. Well, the common denominator is we pray a lot out here. So we get to see a lot of answered prayer. I'll give you a real quick example. One of the guys that came in here, the first thing, you talk about the enemy on his back. The first thing that happened is his house burned down while he was in here the first night he was here. Now that's always a reason, hey, I got to go. But he didn't. The second night he was here, his son and daughter were on a four-wheeler and had a wreck, a really bad one. They brought his son to the hospital. They thought he had a ruptured aorta, which is, that's serious. And so he came by my house, and I'd sent one of my staff guys to Little Rock with him, and I gave him a credit card, and I said, look, y'all eat, do whatever you need to do. Be with this kid, while because I didn't know whether he'd make it or not. And so anyway, we were standing in front of my house, and I said, okay, let's pray this. And I said, okay, Lord, here's what we're asking right now, is that test that they did at the Heber Hospital was wrong, and that he doesn't have a ruptured aorta, and that he's going to be okay. And so they loaded up. They went to Little Rock that night, and the next morning I called this kid's mom, this guy's mom, that it was his kid that was hurt. And I said, well, let me ask you, I said, what's the word on it this morning? She goes, well, that test they did at Heber was wrong, and he doesn't have a ruptured aorta, and he's hurt. He's hurt pretty bad, but I mean, he's going to make it all right. And I just started laughing, and it dawned on me that I'm laughing in this face of this really serious stuff. And I said, I'm really sorry I'm laughing, but I said, that was the prayer we prayed as they drove out of the driveway, So, we love it. We love it when doctors stand there with their mouths wide open and they're totally amazed that, we only thing we can say is this had to be God, because we want to give him all the glory and all the honor. So.
Well, I think we learned a bunch today.
I hope so. I need to make sure that we say this too. The other side is a 6-month to 1 year program. It's a residential. People come in. We have a chapel service every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And
people from the outside can come in.
And this is open to the public, and people can come in. In fact, I wish y'all would come. I wish all y'all would come. But we have a chapel service, and at the end of that chapel service, we ask if anyone wants to come into the program, and they come forward at that time. And then what we do is we interview them, because we're not sure they're ready. We've had a lot of guys that weren't ready. But then if we accept them in, then they bring their stuff and we get them in the program. And then in 6 months after that, they have a chance to graduate phase 1 if they do all the requirements that are asked of them. And then they can go into phase 2, which phase 2 gives them a little bit more freedom, and they can go get a job and just pay us a little bit of rent money. And, just we feed them and house them and all that stuff. And we'll even get them a ride back and forth to work if they need it. But we're trying to set them up to succeed. Jason Schmidt just went to work for us not too long ago, and he's really good at this. And he's really taking a lot of time and helping these guys get their driver's license back, helping them, figure out what fines do you owe.
Get them ready for society.
Get them ready to launch, and go out here and do what you're going to have to do every day. And so that's a really, really good thing. And but that's kind of how this thing works. And we love to get guys in here who are struggling with that kind of stuff, because we get to see what God does. I've got the best job in the world. I've got a front row aisle seat to watch God work every day.
You get to see people coming to Christ all day long.
Yeah, and I hate that they're in that position, and I don't want to misconstrue that as that that I'm waiting for them to come. But look, if they're going to be in that spot, I want to be able to be there to help them and guide them through this. Because I can't do it, but God can. Amen. I can't change their heart, but God can. And
all right, so now here comes the hard question.
Okay.
What's the reason for the podcast?
The reason for the podcast, as much as anything, is, this thing I believe that I've watched happen since we started this is that there's a movement going on, and there's people who are broken that need to find somewhere to go. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to make people aware of what's going on out here. And, because the other side may not be the place that they want to come to. They may want to go somewhere else. And what we're going to try to do is highlight different programs and have those folks come in here and talk to us about their program. And maybe somebody that's struggling that needs to go somewhere will see one of these podcasts and go, oh, that sounds like the place I want to be. And it doesn't have to be here as long as they're getting help. And that's the main thing.
Well, the nice thing about it, we've got it up there on the screen.
Yes.
Recovery Arkansas and beyond.
And beyond.
It's not just about being in Arkansas. No. If you're in California,
right,
and this podcast touches your heart,
right,
and if you contact us, we'll help you find a place, no matter where you are.
Yes.
So as you can see up on the screen right now, I'll have all the information on how to contact us.
Right.
And just get a hold of us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Understand that God is waiting for you.
Right.
All you have to do is ask. And as men, that's the hardest thing for us to do, is succumb our pride.
Right.
And admit that we have a problem.
Yes.
And then address it. And the best way to do that is to ask Jesus into our heart.
Right.
Okay. And say, I can't do this alone. I need help.
Right.
And that's what you guys are here for.
That's right. The second fold part of the podcast, I would like for the other side as much as I would for some of these other facilities, because we're going to try to make sure that people have an opportunity to donate to the other facilities too, to help them. But what we're trying to do right now, we're trying to put a program together. We call it Friends of the Other Side. And all we're asking is that people donate $20 a month. And if they would donate $20 a month, and we get enough people doing that, then it's going to free us up to go out and do more mission work. Because here's the thing, and we call this a local mission. We always have. One of the reasons that we do that is because when I went on a mission trip in 2005, I went to Mexico and had a great week, man. My whole focus that whole week was on what am I going to do for God. Got home, got busy, got work, wife got to go here, daughter's got to go there. Next thing you know, it's all kind of gotten muddy again. And I said, we go halfway around the world to do these missions. And if you open that door and throw a rock, that's where we're missing our mission. It's right here at home because we get so busy and involved in life, And so what we decided, and you're talking about doing the community projects. One of the things I wanted to do was this be a mission. And if one of these churches needs some help with stuff, we'll send people out. If people not necessarily in church, I'd love to go out and help folks who are not being church right now. Anybody that needs some help, we have moved people, we have raked leaves, we have,
built decks.
Built decks. Wheelchair ramps has been a big thing for us too. We've had people who couldn't afford to have a wheelchair ramp built, and we'll go and build a wheelchair ramp for them. And we've had people who could afford to have a wheelchair ramp built, but they would buy the materials, and we would come over and build it, and then they would give us a donation. So, but I would love to be able to get to a place where it's easier to do that, because you're not trying to scramble around and make those ends meet. Those ends are being met. Now we get to kick back and we get to go and do more mission work. That's really where my heart is.
That's what this podcast is for, and there's going to be people that are out there that are going to watch it, and God's going to touch their heart.
Yeah, you're right.
And $20 a month is not that big a deal.
It's not that big a deal.
The other fun thing that we're going to do is, as you can see up on the screen right now, is our email address.
Yes.
And I want people to email us and email questions.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Too.
And if there's somebody that wants us to pray for them, we'll be more than happy to do that.
We will be more than glad.
And if there's people who just really wonder what God's all about,
yes.
And let me tell you, this place, there's a lot, like you said, Jesus is walking these halls.
Yes, he is.
And, he answers prayers, and we all know that.
He does. And, we have a chapel service every morning. Mm-hmm. The guys, before they start their day, they have a chapel service at 7, and we have one we end our day with God, too. At 7 o'clock, we have a chapel service in the evening. And if you send your prayer request to us, we'll be glad to print those out and read them in chapel and get the guys to come up and pray over those requests, and we'd be more than glad to do that.
Well, let's close this thing up in prayer.
Okay, let's do that. Heavenly Father, Lord, I come to you in Jesus' name, and I just lift Steve up to you, Lord. He's been a great help to us, and Lord, I just lift this podcast up to you. Lord, I lift this ministry up to you. Lord, all the people who have been here in the past, all the people who are here now, and all the people that you're going to send to us. Lord, we just ask right now, Lord, just continue to bless this ministry so we can go out and show the light of Christ like you asked us to do. And we're going to give you all the praise and all the honor and all the glory for it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. This is fun.
Yeah, it was.
We're going to have a good time.
Yeah, we are going to have a good time.
We will see you next week.
Yes.
God bless.
Hey, and thanks for watching today. I'm glad you joined us. Hope you'll join us again. I hope some of the things that we talk about are going to be interesting to you. But I want to kind of tell you a little quick, kind of a snapshot of us. We're Recovery Arkansas and Beyond, and we're an arm of the Other Side ministry. We're a faith-based, Christ-centered recovery center to help guys get through addiction, whatever addiction that may be, drugs, alcohol, whatever. And we just wanted to put something together that would kind of highlight some of these other guys and show them what we're doing in Arkansas. We wanted to put this thing together so you could see what we're doing out here. Because there's a movement going on in the state right now where a lot of people have come together and put these facilities in similar to ours, and we're out here trying to help these guys get off this methamphetamine, get off of this fentanyl, get off of all these things that cause them so much trouble. And we wanted to put something together so that you could see what's going on and what's happening in your communities. We don't charge anybody to come out here. We felt like that Jesus paid the price, and so it doesn't cost anything for these guys to come out here, because we never wanted anyone to not come and get help because they felt like they couldn't afford it. So what we're going to ask you today, and we're not going to wear you out with this, but what we're going to ask for today is that if it's something you could do and you would like to donate to us, if you look below, you'll see a QR code, and we'll also include our email address. So one way or another, however you want to get in touch with us, that'll make it available for you to do that. And just let us know what you might want to do. There's one thing I definitely want to do on this program is I want to encourage you guys to send us emails to that email address and let us know your prayer requests and what's bothering you and the things that you may need prayer for. It may be a loved one who's struggling with addiction. It may be someone who's having some health issues. And send us those. And we have chapel out here 2 times a day. And we'll be more than glad to pray over those prayer requests. And also what I want you to do as much as anything, I want you to send me praise reports. And those praise reports are what's God done for you. Because a lot of times, we're out there praying about, Lord, I hope you'll help me with this. But a lot of times he helps us with it, and we just want to shout it from the mountaintops. So send me those prayer requests and those praise reports, and we'll try to read as many praise reports as we can every week and just kind of let you know what's going on. So again, thanks for watching. And we ask right now that if you subscribe to the channel or you hit that like button for us or share this with your friends. That's what we really like for you to do. And let's get this out to as many people as we can get it out to. So thanks for watching. We love you. Come back and see us.